The following dramatization is taken from the records of Intercorp's Platform 7 incident report. "Seth, we have a problem," shouted Eric, the space walking technician, who was attached to the outer hull of Platform 7, a self-sustaining entertainment venue that floated along the outer edge of the Horsehead Nebula. I see it. Seth radioed back. A rogue asteroid was headed out of the blackness of deep space and directly towards the platform. "Eric, get inside right now. I am going to eject the hotel pods." Seth continued. "How long do we have?" Eric asked, his heart racing as he entered the sealed passage between space and the platform. 47 seconds, came the short reply from Seth. "Get yourself into Pod 3. I am launching them now." "What about you?" Eric asked as he ran for Pod 3. "I am going to Pod 1. I have set out the distress call. Be safe," Seth said as he burst into a run headed for his pod. Luck was on their side on this night, because the platform was mostly empty. That is, except for the Miss Milky Way contestants and the small production crew that had arrived earlier that day. "I made it to 3, Eric said, panting. "I made it to 1, Seth said, also breathless. Just as the hotel pods had disconnected from the platform, the asteroid arrived. Metal twisted tore and was pushed aside as the massive disc-shaped asteroid sliced through the platform as if it were not there. Pods 2 and 3 maneuvered easily out of the way, but hotel pod number 1 was not so lucky. A large chunk of the platform crashed into the engines on pod 1, causing a silent but dazzling explosion, ripping the engine module completely off of the end of the pod. Eric grabbed the pod-to-pod communicator and shouted into it, calling Seth's name repeatedly as he watched Pod 1 drift closer and closer to the nebula, having been pushed that way from the impact on its engine module. "I am okay," came the shaky reply from Seth. "No structural damage, but I can't turn the pod around. I have no steering. You have no engines," Eric said flatly. "Well, shit, that's not good. We are headed right for the nebula. We are going to be drifting inside it in under 10 minutes, I would guess," Seth said, staying cool, both with a note of stress in his voice. "I am going to come and nudge you in a different direction. Hold tight," Eric said, but after a beat he spoke again. "Scratch that, my friend. My pod trailing fuel. If I try to maneuver this pod, it'll ignite." "I see that," Seth said as he stared out the side window at Pod 3. "You are lucky it didn't already ignite. What about Pod 2? Anyone there?" "It's empty," came Eric's reply. "I have the Platform's Day crew here in my pod. And, according to the manifest, I have the production crew as well. Eric, you have to get me before we enter the nebula. I didn't realize what pod I was in. I can't stay here." The panic was evident in Seth's voice. "You will be okay, Seth. Stay calm." "They are sleeping," Eric said through a stifled laugh. "Those mean girls won't hurt you. It's not funny. They all hate me. It was an accident." Okay. "How far away is the rescue ship?" Seth asked, dread now filling his voice. "Let me check." Eric was quiet for a long while. "Well, Seth, you might want to get your apologies ready. The ship is 19 minutes out. By my calculation, you go into the nebula in 6 minutes. You're going to be too far in." "I am sorry, Seth." Silence thundered in the vacuum between the two pods as the realization set in. "How long?" Seth asked. "At the rate you are drifting. 14 months until you get to the other side. But hey, luckily you have food and water and air for everyone on board. Unluckily, though, you are in a hotel pod drifting through the nebula where no ship can rescue you with 100 women, who all hate you. It wasn't my fault. I had just crawled out of the maintenance tube. I didn't know that my jumpsuit had ripped, and I didn't know they were going to walk down that hallway either. Seth, I know that you were bent over trying not to make eye contact. I know that you didn't want to make them uncomfortable, but next time make sure that the ass of your jumpsuit isn't completely ripped out." "I am so screwed," came Seth's reply. "You are so screwed. Good luck, my friend. We are going to lose Kamu." Hotel Pod 1 drifted into the nebula, a place that no engines can operate, a place that blocks communication, a place you shouldn't really go into. 10 minutes later, the rescue ship showed up. 20 minutes later, the contestants began to awaken. 14 months later, I was on Platform 7 when the accident happened. Eric said to the captain of the rescue vessel that was awaiting for the emergence of Hotel Pod 1. My buddy Seth was in the pod when it went in. I hear the betting pool has good odds on him, having been locked in the utility closet for the last 14 months. Captain Wood said with a wry smile. Utility closet, ejected into space, not spoken to at all, made to be a servant. After hearing that he mooned all 100 of them earlier in the day, no one has wagered it went well. Some of the contestants' cultures deem that obscenely offensive. I have his favorite whiskey here. We're going to have a long drink, I think, Eric said, showing the captain the large bottle of whiskey he had been holding. Just then the Hotel Pod 1 emerged from the nebula, just as expected. The rescue ship moored alongside and connected to the exterior hatch. The walkway tube extended and sealed against the pod. The door to the pod slowly slid to the side. Eric and the captain watched as the first few contestants crossed the walkway into the rescue ship. The first 4 were very, very pregnant. They looked at the 2 men and winked. Eric and the captain's mouths dropped in surprise. 6 more contestants, 3 of which had babies in their arms. The other 3 were pregnant. 6 more winks. This continued as all 100 contestants filed into the rescue ship. Most were pregnant. Some had a baby. A few had multiple babies. One gaseous contestant had a skin-colored cloud swirling inside her. All winked with huge smiles. After all the contestants had made their way into the rescue ship and been directed to their quarters for the trip back to the nearest system, Seth slowly walked down the walkway out of the pod. Eric and Captain Woods just stared at him, mouths agape. Seth met their gaze, a big cheesy grin plastered to his face. Noticing the whiskey in Eric's hand, he reached out and took it. How? Eric asked, still stunned. I am really, really good at apologizing, he said. Eric let out a sound that was half laugh and half confusion. Captain Wood spoke softly. I am going to need to debrief you. Me too, said Eric. Me three, said 2 crew members in unison, who were standing nearby. Seth laughed. Should I charge admission? I do have a lot of mouths to feed, as you saw. Silence returned to the passageway. Captain, can you tell Earth that I am going to need a new apartment? A very, very big apartment. The preceding account is found under the Intercorp Directory of Emergency Procedures as to why every emergency hotel pod now carries a large variety of contraceptives and makes all hotel guests sign a waiver stating that Intercorp is not financially responsible for any offspring created in an emergency situation in their hotel pods.